Hi, hello, and welcome to the special episode by Argumenta Podcast. The environmental concerns, especially in hindsight of the recent EIA and the protest which has also sprung up. As you all know, in the latest news as well, the several protests which are happening around the country, especially in Goa, has also raised an alarm among not just the activists but also among the students as well, as we are the future of this country. And with the matter of the climate change being an alarming concern, we hope that we will be addressing this key issue and also to kind of spreading awareness with regard to the same. So do join us in this episode and to stay tuned. For those who are new to the Argumentative podcast, we are a team to discuss, deliberate, and debate on several pertaining social, legal, and political issues. And we're also available on platforms such as Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, and do support us and subscribe to. We are joined in with a student run organization called Yugma. And and as an organization, it's very fascinating to note that even in today's times, students are the ones for the voice of the current democracy. Joining with us is Smriti, who is the co-founder of Yugma, and also Vishak, who is the language head of Yugma. Do introduce yourselves, Smriti and Vishak. Where are you from, your college, and what do you guys do as well?
Hi, I'm Smriti. I'm a second year student in Azim Premji University. I'm doing my major in economics and minoring in development. I'm from Bangalore, and yeah, like Joel said, I'm the co-founder of Yugma. Vishak?
Hello everyone, my name is Vishak. I'm a second year student from St. Joseph's College, Bangalore. I'm the language coordinator for the Yugma network.
Please go
Guys,
ahead.
first things first, before we move on, running a student run organization is never easy. So, how do you guys manage it? Don't you think that there's several hurdles and several challenges that you have to face to manage so many students together? So, what's your solution to that problem, guys?
Oh, there definitely is. I think we have like mental breakdowns every other week.
Oh, wow, okay.
But yeah, but also it's really satisfying because we wanted our thing to be in such a way where it wasn't the founders who were going to do anything, who were going to do everything, but it was a more even structure of sorts. So, like Vishak is a coordinator, but he has an equal say in Yugma, as do I. So, in that way, we kind of divide the work and makes it a little easier.
So, you're basically trying to say that it's all decentralized. There's no leader as such.
As such, yeah, there is obviously little centralization, but not very.
Exactly. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I guess when it comes to students, everyone has a thing to say and everyone has their own opinions and how they would like to carry forward things. So that's really good that you guys are willing to give everyone an equal opportunity to be heard. So I think before we proceed, we would like to know a little bit about how you guys started out and how this whole thing materialized.
Right. Okay, I can start and Vishak, maybe jump in whenever you want. So yeah, it actually started off without much of a plan. One of our co-founders, Anjali, she got people from various colleges together to talk about the EIA draft, which was a big thing that was happening at that time, around June, I think. And it was about like trying to raise awareness about it because not a lot of people knew that the EIA draft was being passed and that the public hearing was there and you could kind of object to it. So she got unions from across India, and then that's how we got in touch. And so we collated a bunch of 120-ish college unions across India, and we wrote like letters to the MOEFCC and the PMO, and we asked them to like, with all the objections we had to the draft, and we talked to a bunch of environmentalists and things like that. So as we were doing that, we realized that this could actually be a broader thing because what we were focusing on doing, which was translating the EIA content and making it more accessible to everyone, was a thing that wasn't being done in the environment movement so far. And we thought we were
Exactly.
actually adding value over there somewhere. So we're like, hey, we should probably make this something. So once the public
Which
hearing,
Yeah, but as
go
students,
on,
what
go
were
on.
the real constraints? Example, like I think even in your recent the PIL before the court, if I'm not wrong, even the judge said that why bring in the media and stuff. So, like, is there real encouragement among the students with regard to such kind of initiatives being taken, or is there a lot of discouragement as well? Because as you're also bringing in a lot of unions and colleges as well. So, what are the constraints with regard to it?
Right. Okay. So actually, I'd like to say that the response as such has been kind of mixed, because initially the press and the media were the fact that we were students was what really fascinated them, and they took it very positively. But like Joel said about the PIL, the other people, like, because we reached out to the media to make sure that I think the law students reached out to the media to make sure that the PIL was like received and things like that. They were like, why would you get it out to the media first, and you guys are just doing it for publicity stunts and things like that. So that has been there, which is a little obviously sad, because that wasn't their intention. And at the same time, other environmentalists, like senior environmentalists, they've been very, very encouraging of youth joining in the movement. So mixed reactions, I'd say, but yeah, pretty positive. Nice.
So guys, I just had this query. Like, since we are running as a student-run organization, we'll definitely have a review board, or a group of seniors, or such people that who could help us in the same. So, do you have any such committee who is working for your, as in the seniority limits?
I'm sorry, it's a committee which works towards?
Do you have a review committee of senior members who can, we being students will definitely require advisors from advisory boards per se. So do you
Right.
have an advisory board per se, consisting of environmentalists, and all, like so which is told before? Do
Right.
you have such
So yeah, we do not have like an advisory board as such, but
okay.
we are in touch with a lot of other organizations like Let India Breathe and SEPAC and Fridays for
Oh.
Future. So it's our information is not like limited to our organization. It's something that everyone's there and everyone discusses, and then we kind of put it out. So it's not merely like it's just us doing it. And obviously, whatever we put out as Yugma, we fact check and we check with like some collaborators that we work with and stuff like that. So yeah, nothing
Okay.
formal as such, but yeah.
Yeah, but speaking about
That's
fact
good.
checking, like matter of fact that since you guys are also into the translation of the works of the act as well, how far are you able to stress about very objectively without any kind of biases? And also, who's really doing the translation work of these act?
I think Vishak can answer that well.
We have not exactly translated the EIA Act as such, but then we're looking at these small things that come underneath it, like our projects and all. They don't need EIA clearance. And then what happens if they actually grant those clearance? What happens to the forest around it? What happens to the environment? And that's things like that. That's what we're translating into this one. What we do is we have a group that is fact checking the information that comes through, and then we have people. We have around 50 to 60 people that are there throughout India across 10, 11 languages that are translating it. And then we have those people itself proofreading to ensure that there's no mistakes in it. They check with the original content to see there's no mistakes in it. That's basically how we have structured our group as such.
Okay, Vishak, just adding another question to that. I came across a very interesting observation. So while going through your Instagram page, which will be linked in the description, I came across this very interesting line in your bio. It said all posts are multilingual. So what was the thought behind that, and what made you feel like everything that you give out has to be, posted in different languages, especially vernacular languages? What was the whole thought process behind that?
Oh yeah, I joined in as a volunteer in the beginning when the EIA part was going on. So what the co-founders felt was that the environment movement as such is completely only in English, and that the voices of the people who are in the voices of the actual people who don't know English and who are actually affected by it are not heard. So that so that was the main intention, right? To reach out to those people to ensure that their voices are heard, and that only English and Hindi is. You can't have things only that's happening only in English and Hindi. There's so many languages in India, and most of us don't even know both the languages, and it's difficult for us to converse in a particular language as such. And few people feel confident in conversing in a different language. So we felt that if they have to understand what's going on, we have to reach out to them in a language they understand, and if it's not English, so we have to use their language, like if it's Kannada, Marathi, or Tamil, Telugu, and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
Oh wow, that's great.
yeah. So adding on to what Vishak said, we also felt like there's ample content in English. Like you just go type anything and
True.
you'll get anything about it. But the same thing is not there in any other regional languages. And which
Correct.
so the information is practically just being passed along within the same crowd and within the same people. It's just like an echo chamber. So if you want to break out of it and actually create an environmental consciousness among people, you need to use language. And we actually found, very interestingly, I'm sure Vishak can agree with me, that as we started using more language, we got people who wouldn't even really be very interested in the environment as such. The fact that we were
Because they
using,
understand it.
yeah, exactly. The fact that we use
Exactly.
different languages was kind of attracting them.
That's precisely why we went to the translation, right? The movement has been largely in English, and then there are people who don't understand it. And you need to reach out to them. They might not. I mean, unless we understood the EA thing because it was made in English, and then we understand English. You go to a village and they don't know English, and they'll probably have no idea about what this EA thing is. So unless you reach out to them in a language they'll understand, they'll never know about what's happening, and then those are the people who are really affected by all these things, right? Harming the environment and things.
But
So
sometimes with the translation also comes like by mistake a misrepresentation, or like you had like by mistake you must have stated it a little different from what the act intended it to be. So how would you tackle that particular situation while translating?
Yes.
That actually,
Go ahead.
that's actually been pretty interesting. So when people felt like something was not okay or something like that, or they felt like their language wasn't represented amongst so many other languages, they just commented and they said their opinion. And then we're like, okay, you know what? If you can help, why don't you help us? So anyone who does point out something, that means they do have knowledge about it. So we just get them into it. So it's also a learning process, right? It's not like it's like, especially because we're I think just a few months old. So
I mean, that's a very smart approach to this.
yeah, I mean,
Self-solving problem.
exactly. And a lot of people actually did join that way. So it's good for both of us.
So it's I think since you guys are pretty much stressing upon the point that since other regional languages also are of prior importance, what do you guys so sincerely feel with regard to the same? Like do we really need to have like a unifying language with regard to it, because so that all people can really understand with regard to the act, or is regional language itself fine itself?
My opinion is that, first of all, Hindi is not a unifying language. Not everybody does understand
Yeah, I
it.
mean, come on. The only reason we know it being in Bangalore is because we were forced to learn it, right? Indirectly.
Yeah, kind of. Vishak has a really interesting story about this.
Oh, please do add on to it, Vishak.
So Hindi is, I studied in a CBSE school, right? So Hindi is a compulsory language over there. And I'm from Karnataka, so I naturally chose
Let me
Kannada
guess,
as my...
KV?
No, I studied in Kumarins itself.
Oh, okay.
So I studied Kannada right from first standard, and then when we were basically forced into choosing Hindi as a third language, and I never really cared for Hindi. Being from South Indian, I mean, I'm barely going to use that language. Like only if I travel to North Indian state, I'll probably have to use it, right? So I never really cared for it. But then so I just passed my exams like that, and thankfully it got over after a few years, the third language thing, and then I was happy with Kannada. And then what happened when I joined this college is that there are people from other states coming in, right? So you can't expect them. I mean, you technically should expect them to learn your language, but many people do not learn the local language of that state, right? So what happened was people started talking in Hindi, and I didn't know anything. Like I couldn't understand anything. So what I did, I started watching videos. The filter copy videos helped a lot actually. There are those English subtitles, right? So I could connect those English subtitles to the Hindi words, and then that's how I started, building my vocabulary in Hindi, and now I'm pretty confident in understanding Hindi, but speaking, and it'll take some time, right? So
yeah, I mean, I also experienced something very peculiar. So I was in a school where a lot of people just used to converse in English. So I wasn't really exposed to any other languages, and I'd learned Hindi up till like 8th, 9th, and then after that I took French for my second language. And only after I got into Christ was I exposed to all the vernacular and regional languages. I know it's a fault on my part for not knowing Kannada, being a Bangalorean, but that's when I was actually exposed to all these new languages and I started learning. And this one day, outside our college, there's like this huge line of autos. So I just went and I spoke to this one auto driver in Kannada. I'm like, "Will you go here?" And I said that in Kannada. He replied to me in Hindi, and that's when I realized that okay, fine. It seeped into the minds of people that okay, fine, this is what you need to use. Only then will people understand it.
yeah. It's,
Yeah, actually, so my case is a little different though. I grew up with Hindi a little, and it was always there. But like even when I did go to college, I realized that like most people, like it's a default to just speak in Hindi. Like they just assume that you know Hindi. Uh, and then you have to be like, hey, by the way, I don't like people who don't know, they'll be like, I don't know Hindi, so can you please like speak in a different language? But just that assumption itself that everyone knows Hindi, that is a very,
Exactly.
yeah.
yeah.
No, even when it comes to like the normal language that they speak, it's not the proper Hindi that we have learned in our classes that we're going to communicate with these people, because they speak in that real, the proper colloquial language which we will not even understand a word of. Which I think I have found it really hard at times to converse in that. But see, when I speak to them like in the proper word by word Hindi, they won't, they find me inferior in speaking that kind. So I think when it comes to academics and the way we speak, this is the issue like a lot of people face, I guess. And there's even like when I went through the vision document of yours, uh, the approach that we have chosen for fighting, towards environmental justice is a bit different. So like if you look around, there'll be a lot of environmentalists who are working towards with similar goals. And I just wanted to know like how Yugma Environmental Justice Clinic is different from other working environmental organizations.
Again, there isn't, at least we aim to not have too much of a hierarchy within the clinic. So it's not like one person is delegating the work to others, which I think is not the case in other clinics. I'm not too sure about that. And of course, the language part of it, where we take up more local issues, and whatever insights we get from it, we analyze it and like make it into like bite-sized content, which we translate into the appropriate language.
My specific question would also be that why did this idea come into your mind? Aren't, like as mentioned, there must be several other environmental organizations as well. What really drew you towards picking up this initiative? Because as I stated earlier, you're just students and you're a student-run organization. But then, what really drove you to do this task, especially?
Right. Okay. So the first thing that we had with the EIA itself, right? Like we also just started off with English, and even our letters and everything was in English only. But then we saw that one of the main contentions that were against the draft was that it wasn't translated into any language apart from English and Hindi. And I think later they translated into Odia or something like that. But that also like it was just like a half-hearted attempt. But yeah, so first of all, the way the draft was pushed onto the public amidst lockdown, where you couldn't really protest about it, and the fact that public hearing as such wasn't really there, and mails were blocked, and the whole thing of FFF and everyone being blocked under UAPA. So with all of that, like it was really important to get people to know what was happening. And we shared a lot of English content, obviously, and we got everything. But we realized that when we were talking to people on the ground, my akka who comes home, if I asked her about EIA, she would not know what it is. And then we contacted regional newspapers and we told them about it, and they were like, this is something that we haven't even covered in our newspapers. So that's when we started translating and getting things into shape. And then we're like, you know what, if we're actually doing this, let's just go full out. So we called up for volunteers, and like overnight we just got like, I think like hundreds of them, 100-ish. We're like, okay, whoa, okay, we'll just do this then. So yeah.
So what if the counter to that is that why are you so against businesses? Or like, I think what the government is trying to do is more of liberalization as well, so in order to bring in more into the economy. So don't you think it's actually counterproductive to the economy as well, with regard to
Right. Okay.
the licenses as well, licenses and things like that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is a debate that we have been receiving from that time. But honestly, this is a thing which kind of bothers me, because okay, there is ease of doing business with this draft, agreed, and that will probably create more jobs at the moment, and you will maybe have a boost in the economy or whatever. But I'm talking about generally the model itself. That was our point. The whole model that we're running on is not sustainable, not just environmentally, but it's not going to hold up in the long run. Whatever materials we're getting, whatever resources we're getting is from the environment. And if we're going to keep polluting the
True.
environment, what exactly are we getting out of this? And even within that, like economists love using this, like they keep saying development and this is for development. What
But
exactly
it's
are we
sustainable
developing?
development, right?
Yeah, no, but not even sustainable development. Like,
yeah.
how is it development if people are getting killed because of gas explosions near their house?
No.
Near
What
a
I'm trying to say
water.
is that is the end goal, right?
Yeah,
Sustainable
yeah.
development. But
Um,
with a policy like this, you're just allowing more players to enter the market, and then they'll just exploit.
sorry.
Yeah.
Exploit.
Just reiterating what I said earlier. I said the end goal of a project like this ideally is sustainable development, but through the model they're proposing, it allows for more businesses to enter the market. And do you not think that over a period of time, as you rightly stated, it would, lead to an exploitation of natural resources, Joel?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. And yeah, so from the beginning itself, I was kind of, we were kind of advocating for sustainable development. But as we're getting more into the movement, we're kind of realizing that that actually may be a
It's
paradox by
utopian.
itself. Yeah,
Yeah.
sustainable development doesn't really seem,
Exist. I think, yeah,
yeah.
being students of economics, we're fed with the idea that okay, fine, you can harmonize between development and environment protection or protection of natural resources, but to get that sort of balance is impossible, especially in
Yeah,
a
I
world
mean,
like this.
I guess so, but that is again within our framework. Like, see, within environmental, within economics itself, development itself, like we define it so narrowly. Like, development would mean increase in GDP, but
Exactly.
development doesn't mean well-being of people. Development doesn't mean like clean water, clean air. That's not considered as development.
Yeah. I think it's
So,
only later on that the ideas of the Human Development Index and all of that came in,
right,
and that's when
exactly.
it really started to have some value.
Yeah, but do you think it has value even now? Like, I feel like it still doesn't have
No,
any.
of course
Yeah.
not. In my opinion, it's just a statistic.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, yeah, like it's just seen as another thing. It's not productive enough for our economy to have a clean air or clean water.
So, also another question I would like to ask you guys, especially Vishak, is how do you guys reach out to the masses? Yes, you're doing a lot of stuff in giving out information in vernacular languages. Are you restricted only to Instagram and virtual platforms, or are you also doing groundwork?
We have started with groundwork now, but as of now, we're a little bit restricted to Instagram. But we have come up with our website that's going to be launched in a few days or few weeks. And then we have this another project which we're coming up with called Narratives Project that basically uh, is a way for the people to tell their stories to us directly. Not especially in the regional languages, and not English or Hindi, but even Hindi also, but not mainly English. Use the Malayalam, Kannada, Telugu, Tamil, and tell their stories about what's happening around them. That's something we're doing, and the website which I was talking about, where we plan to put our posts and everything, which is mainly restricted to Instagram, onto the website also. So it's more reachable to people. I have met with people who are my age who don't have access to Instagram, and they don't know what's happening with our network as such. So the website is something we're coming up with. Yeah.
And what was the kind of response you got from these regional newspapers? Were they receptive to your ideas and to your propositions?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Like apart from Instagram, we're also trying to create a stronger platform in Facebook and Twitter because Facebook has a lot more reach and Twitter is generally good, like for tweet storms and things like that. But yeah, like Vishak said, but newspapers in general, yeah, the thing has been pretty good. The response has been pretty good, like I said in the beginning. But like after a point, they need something fresh. Like they can't keep saying the same thing again.
True.
So yeah, so that way it kind of died down. But anyway, that wasn't really our goal as such. So we're focusing more on like our personal contacts and when we weren't in lockdown, like we or like we're a pan-Indian network, so we have like people all over the country. So we use those networks and technology kind of brings us together in a sense. So yeah, that's what we've been trying.
So have you guys taken any what do you say? Any measures against the Goa, the whole thing happening in Goa about the railway line and stuff?
Yeah, so we have done a few tweet storms and things like that. We're in touch with a few of the environmentalists who are there. and of course, like general awareness and support of things that are going on. And I think we have a post which is also being translated. Oh, no, which was put out in Marathi.
Which was translated. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Adding on
Marathi
to
and
that,
Konkani we had.
yeah, adding on to that, what are your current programs, projects as such? Like, what are you dealing with as of now, the around the country?
Okay, so we're doing the thing about we're having a campaign about the Farm Bill, the Farm Act, sorry, and air pollution in general. We're doing a research project about renewable energy and how feasible they actually are as alternatives in the future. The legal clinic is doing a report on the mining law amendment, and they also formed a filed a PIL against the PRR, the public consultation happening on Zoom. So that's been happening there. And apart from that, like Vishak said, like we're just focusing on the narratives thing, which is like getting stories from local areas and seeing what's happening. Like we did the Hyderabad floods, we did the Thano forest in Uttarakhand, and things like that. Yeah.
Well, I think what you guys are doing is amazing. And usually, what happens is when you're faced with a situation like the pandemic that was going on, and it still is, you tend to die down. But I think the fact that most of your operations have been online, it's only given an impetus to your reach and allowed you to, to get the message across to as many people as you can. And yeah, I mean, I must say, I do appreciate your efforts, and I mean, what you guys are doing is pretty good. So just keep going, guys.
And even Minaj, like I think just before we had stated, like many of the media platforms failed to inform people or failed to bring out the news with a lot of environmental issues that are being faced across the country. So like just now when the activities of YUCMA were explained like a couple of minutes before, I just came to like half of them were not even reported, into our knowledge, or we did not even get to know about half of these things. So I think media should actually come forth with, effective measures of reporting such issues in a wider perspective. Because apart from the numerous, news reports and contents that can just boost the TRP rating or just boost the number of viewership and all, I think these sort of issues have to be brought forth, and enthusiastic youths like that of the initiative taken by YUCMA should, definitely they should be supported and literally aided by these platforms as well as I believe. And even I had this query of like how well or how many students have taken part as of now, or what is their kind of enthusiasm that these students put forth towards the working of YUCMA. Like we can find an enthusiastic group of students who are working towards the betterment. And how many students are there as of now, and what is the number of participation? How do you recruit students? So if our viewers also, if anybody would like to be a part of YUCMA, how do you recruit these students, and how do you invite them into the group as such?
Right. Currently, I think, like Vishak said, we have 70 people in the legal aid clinic. Apart from that, we have, I think, safe to say around 100-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, apart from that,
Yeah,
apart from
100.
the language, sorry. And how we recruit people is we're trying not to take too many people right now, because the more people we get, the more overwhelming it is after a point. But
Okay.
we were in need of video editors and graphic designers and things like that. So we just put up calls on our social media. We put up emails to all the
Okay.
college unions that we're in touch with. So yeah, if you follow us there, you will get updates.
Okay, that's great.
But with our organization, don't you also have like political pressures, or like since you take up certain stands which might be counter to the government as well? Isn't it sometimes a little too political, or is it sometimes a bit, like they might consider you as students as well? But then isn't it also like that way? Like people might consider it to be a little political or and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we are doing is definitely political. Like, no, I'm not saying politically biased, but it is political. And this was actually something that deterred a lot of college unions from actually joining us, because they felt like we were going against the government, and this is not something that students should really do. Um, and yeah, I mean, that is the thing that we face. But at the same time, we try to make sure that we're not biased. Like, we don't want to be either on the left side or the right side of it. We want to have proper information and just environment is the main goal. Yeah, we haven't received like serious backlash from anything yet. I don't think we're that important yet. So yeah, so far, yeah.
I mean, you can't look. I mean, standing up for the nature is not exactly political, right? It's something that we have to protect it no matter what, because it's something we get our water and everything from the forests, and you can't go against the nature, is what I feel, right? And then
Correct.
you that's it. So you can't exactly think of it as a political movement. If any government is doing something that's going to harm the environment, you have to stand up to it. It might be the left or the right. Just because we're the right government is at the center and then we are standing up to it, that does not mean we are supporting the left or we're going against the government. It just means that we're standing up to what is right.
Yeah, because directly or indirectly, we're also affected by what measures they take, right? For example, if the ring road project happens in Bangalore, so many trees are going to be cut down, and
Yeah.
we're only going to be facing adverse air quality.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I guess the onus is on all of us to take up the stand for the environment at the end of the day, because if we don't stand up for what is right, fearing political backlash, or as you said, whether we're affected or not, it's going to come back to us eventually.
Yeah,
Especially our generation.
Yeah.
Exactly, true. You don't even know if we're going to live for another 50 years. It's reached that point.
Sad. Very
That's
sad.
what's scary.
Like even climate change has been like taken as one of the biggest issues globally. Like even United Nations have taken up a lot of steps to call up for the member nations to take up, their nationwide steps against climate change. And I mean, it's been one of the biggest issues that are facing. Like I think a lot of incidents that are taking place in the state-wise spaces within our country. Like I don't know how many of you remember the case of the flat demolition that had happened in Kerala. Like numerous flats were demolished down because they had broken the CRS boundary of creating near the water spaces. So I think the first part.
No, sorry, I just said oh.
Okay. So like I just wanted to tell that like at the first part, like in the first training, whenever I come to know about these kind of depletion of natural resources, I get to remember the water bodies, the water resources on first hand. Like they have an increased tendency to pollute these water resources, and most of them fail to comply with what the government has set up, like a distance that to be kept from the water bodies, which they refer to as the CRS distance and all. So I mean, these kind of constructions, which are often or many authorities get bribed by the individuals who want to come up with all these things, and to an extent, legal boundaries are often covered with the kind of power and authority that they have. Even in the case of EIA, like I've heard a lot of people condemning the draft also on the grounds of the capitalist, interventions that would come into the environment. So, do you think that EIA as a whole, apart from the numerous drawbacks that we had mentioned, also has an element of capitalist interventions into the environmental proceedings?
Oh, definitely. I think that is the only thing which is guiding it. The whole point of making ease of business and getting licenses easier and stuff, that is completely purely capitalistic interests.
Yeah, but they are not even questionable, I guess, right? Like many a times nobody dares to question them because they have the power. They won't even listen to what authorities don't even try to question them. I think that is the biggest issue like we face as a whole.
Exactly. But also there's a thing to be considered, like with things like setting up businesses and things like that, there are gains that people are going to get from it. So why would people actually stand up for it? Because
right now it's
up against capitalism or the environment, and if capitalism is benefiting you, then obviously you're just going to go, it's a bigger struggle. I do, yeah.
That's a whole other debate. Let's not get into that.